Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today in this video we're going to be taking a look into Mechagon Workshop to talk about some tips and tricks for both tank players and non-tank players alike. If you want to see more content like this, feel free to hit that like button and that sub button below. Enjoy. So what we're going to do is kind of walk throughout the dungeon, and I'm going to show various clips. Now, if there's anything that I miss or you'd like to add, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. If there's enough down there, or if I find out some more things, I will definitely make a part 2. All right, so this first trick will actually be a little bit more towards the intermediate to advanced level. This would be more common to see in a coordinated group. If you watch some of your favorite streamers and top end players, a lot of them are utilizing this strategy, and that is to clear the first boss room trash in Mechagon Workshop without using any cooldowns or like barely taking any damage. So how you would do this is everyone in your group besides the tank needs to actually stay up at the starting area. What this means is that the mobs won't actually be able to target those players with abilities because they are just too far out of range. The tank will have to run up and trigger the rocket launcher tonks to send out their rocket barrage. Mobs will actually take damage from these barrages. This is not a bug. This has always been in the game as a mechanic, and you'll want to make sure you're keeping your mobs inside of those swirls. Tanks might want to use a cooldown on fortified weeks or on higher tyrannical weeks if they feel like they need to. So in this clip here, you see me committing Incarn, which yes, does a lot of damage, but it also helps me stay alive and also neutralize these mobs. An old strategy was to use the hammers on the side of the room, but they are currently bugged or not scaling with key level, so they almost do no damage, but they will stun. That is trick number 1. Trick number 2 is actually going to come down to routing. Now, there is enough percent in this dungeon to skip most of the trash after first boss and before second boss. So there's this sewer-like area after you leave the first boss room. You can pull the Dreadlord Nathrazim and the drill up to kill the percent, but after this, you can invis all the way to the boss room. You can do this with Shroud of Concealment or with invisibility potions. This alleviates some of the pain points of feeling like you're over pulling trash, and especially if you start getting really close on the timer, utilizing strats like this to make sure you're not going too far over on percent is a great strategy to implement. If you end up to not skip this tunnel, these slimes have a very, very small amount of health, as you've probably noticed. They don't scale all that well with key level, mainly because their initial health pool is also really, really small. But similar to bursting, you want to be very, very careful about how quickly you kill them with overlapping mechanics. Now, the best strategy for this is actually to kill them all at the same exact time, and then you can actually line of sight. So there are a few points where you can line of sight around these different pipelines and pipes coming in and out of the ground. So feel free to utilize that if you decide to pull this trash. So the next trick is going to kind of teeter back towards that more advanced tactic on Cujo, the second boss of the instance. So Cujo has pretty much 3 to 4 main abilities. So during the fight, crates will drop, and these are utilized to create line of sight points so you can dodge the venting flames mechanic. There is a specific way where the tank can position the boss up next to the crate so DPS can continue attacking while also maintaining line of sight. This condition is very hard to meet, and I don't recommend doing it in pugs because a lot of pugs don't know how to do this, because it's very easy to accidentally step out and get nuked by the boss. So how this works is that right after the dog leaps away to your 4 targets, you as the tank player need to pull the boss to the corner of said box and then move along the long side. We all know how rectangles work, right? And then when he starts casting Venting Flames, you can move right to the edge of the crate and continue DPSing. As you can see here, my AoE is still hitting him, my Thrash is hitting him, my Mangle's hitting him, and DPS players and casters can also stand in the same position and continue DPSing. This is really important for higher tyrannical keys because it allows you to have good uptime on the dog. That's the biggest problem about this fight, is that you sometimes will lack the uptime to actually kill this boss quickly, and it can get really annoying for some DPS with how much mobility and movement is required during the fight. This next trick really only applies to Venthyr players, but it can also be used by a couple of different classes, like rogues, hunters, demon hunters, and anyone who really plays Venthyr. you can actually Door of Shadows all the way up to the top of the conveyor belt. This might also work with Heroic Leap, but this allows you to quickly turn off the flame jets so the rest of your group can quickly and easily, without much risk, make it to the end of the conveyor belt without dying or taking extra damage. And then a little side note, if you are someone who gets up to the top first, you can actually trigger the RP for the next little gauntlet event by walking up to the edge here and standing on this little tiny post that you can see here, this little fence. And that means when everyone finally does get up here, you are just ready to go. Another cool little trick is that the spider tank, the Blastitron X80, can actually be outranged simply by just standing far enough away. You don't have to actually dodge the capacitor discharge. So if the tank pulls the mob off to the left-hand side or right-hand side of the room, your DPS can actually just max range at 40 yards and not have to worry about getting hit. This little minigame is a little confusing to a lot of new players. So this minigame after the gauntlet requires you to avoid these detector bots. There are set patterns, so as you do this key more and more, you will start to learn how the patterns look. There are also these smoke jets that are throughout this little gauntlet area. If you are standing within the smoke, the mobs can't actually target you. So you can just navigate through. As you can see, some players are running off to the left-hand side, but you can also Door of Shadows and blink past the bots. This just takes a little bit more finessing. And then one last thing you see me doing here is actually moving back to grab one of the Nathrezim. This is because, well, our healer got ported back. So we decided to kill some time by pulling this Infiltrator. The next little tip that I have, not to get too much into bosses, actually I'm going to probably skip bosses for now, but if you want to see a full boss guide, let me know in the comments below. But for right now, we're going to talk about the spider tanks after you kill Sparkflux. These two spider tanks, if you decide to pull them together, you want to make sure you're prioritizing the spider tank at the top of the hill first, because what triggers the next travel point in this dungeon is actually the top spider tank dying. So you can see in this clip here, I'm actually marking him with Skull, and this is indicating to my group that this one needs to die first. It does take about 5 to 7 seconds for the bot to initiate, so once the spider tank dies, all you have to do is finish off the other spider tank, and then you should be ready to go right into it. This is a minimal time save, but it's an important note to help speed up your key, because every second counts. Last but not least, we find ourselves right before King Mechagon, and this is where you're going to find some of the scarier units in his arsenal. In these pulls, you actually don't want to target the defenders, nor do you want to target these shield generators. The shield generators actually work similar to the very first pull in the dungeon against both enemies and allies. So your group members can actually stand inside of these shield barriers to take reduced damage. As you can see, my debuff here is giving me 75% reduced damage. And this is really important when you're fighting defenders, because defenders do a thing called short out, which causes AoE to pulse, especially going into the next week, because we were kind of blessed with the Tyrannical week this week. Going into Fortified weeks, these pulls are going to be extremely scary. So leave the defender up when you can, and make sure you're standing inside of the bots when you can. So those are my tips for Mechagon Workshop. If you have anything that you would like to include down below in the comment section, feel free to do that. If there's enough down there, or if I figure anything else out, I will make a part 2. If there's any specific boss guides that you would like to see for this dungeon, also let me know in the comments below, or feel free to join my Discord where I include things like routes and boss guides and just general tips for tanks and Mythic Plus players alike. If you ended up enjoying this video, please leave a like, hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my patrons, Brian and Linus V. Thank you guys so much for the support, and until next time, take care.